Welcome back, everybody. It's Jeff Hansen. We're back. We're talking BYU sports again. It's part 2 of our mailbag. Got so many good questions. Couldn't whittle them down. And it's fall camp, and there's just not a lot of new news that is happening. Shout out New Heights. Not a lot of new news that is happening out of camp. Every coach is being coy, a little bit weird. We'll get news this week as camp officially comes to a close and BYU starts moving into prep for Southern Illinois. That's how close we are. It's almost time for game prep. It's almost time for the season. We're 2 weeks away. Football's here. Football's here. It's right around the corner. We're almost there. All right. Part 2 of the mailbag. I've got 8 more questions to tackle today. So apologies if this gets a little bit long like last video was, but they're good questions. It's good content. So I'm not going to apologize for that. Let's get right into it. The first question that I have here. It seems like Austin Peay and McKay Madsen, maybe Drew Cofield, are the only high 3-star recruits left on BYU's 2025 board. Are there others who fans don't know about? And are there some guys who flip? And then we go through some names. That's a lot of questions in one. So let's get into each of them individually. Those are the headliners. Yes. Austin Peay, McKay Madsen, those are the headliners of this class. Drew Cofield has told me that he's going to come and take a visit sometime during the season. So he's obviously on BYU's board as well. Those are the big names that are left. Yeah. I mean, that's really kind of it. And then are there names that are going to flip? There's names that BYU is going to try to flip. BYU's made an effort at Sam Turner. I don't think that one happens, but it's still possible. They're still trying to do what they can. The Vete, Siosioa Vete, I think he possibly could flip. His brother, Kalepi Vete, is already committed. So there's already an in there. There's a lot of momentum, a lot of reason to believe that he could flip. And the Nusi Tamoipeau, BYU will continue to try. Yeah, BYU is going to continue to try. A lot of people, myself included, thought BYU was in the leader, and then he ended up committing to Stanford just a couple of weeks ago. BYU will continue to try and flip him. Are there anybody else that people don't know about? I mean, yes, not anybody that I know about right now. I know BYU's actively evaluating more defensive tackles, so there's going to probably be some new offers that are extended. Those might be to guys who are committed to other schools. Those might be to guys who are under the radar as BYU moves down the priority list and things like that. So yes, there are some guys, but we're in the transfer portal era as well, and that has to be taken into account. It's always a little bit funny. And this cycle of recruiting, because of early signing day, because of the transfer portal, if you look at the uncommitted recruits in the class of 2025 right now, there's not very many of them. With summer official visits and that portal looming where teams can just go to the portal instead of finding guys in high school late in the cycle, you're seeing more and more players secure their spot in the summer, which leaves a lot of room for those late bloomers who don't develop until they're junior going into their senior year and then into their senior years. Leaves room for JUCO guys, and it leaves room for players who maybe committed early and then don't feel the love as much from their the school that they committed to, so maybe they flip late. It's kind of an interesting cycle, and it feels a little bit like it's false calm right now, like the eye of the storm, that everything's kind of quiet really across the board. A lot of teams are moving towards 2026. You're seeing a lot more attention there, but 2025 is not done. Nobody signed anything yet. So I do think we're going to have another influx. I think BYU will be right there included, and they have to be. I mean, there's just not enough in the class right now. I really like the recruiting class right now, but it's lacking some headliners and it's lacking some defensive tackles. So yes, there's got to be more there. Okay, very simple question here. Question number 2. O-line improved. Very simple answer. Yes, they have. We've talked about it quite a bit on this channel, why I think they will be better. So check out some of those previous videos for more details. But yes, I think the O-line has improved, and I think TJ Woods is the real deal. Next question. What 6 games can we realistically win this season? Are there more than 6? We showed progress at the end of last season, even though we lost those games to OU and Oklahoma State. I don't think there's a single game on BYU's schedule that BYU cannot win. That includes Utah. That includes Kansas State. I think that BYU can win every single game. I think BYU could realistically lose 10 games, 11 games even. I mean, Wyoming is no gimme. This schedule is tough. but BYU is not completely out of things. I don't think that BYU just goes and gets blown out for 7 or 8 games. I just, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm a homer, but I don't see that happening. But can I see BYU? Can I see a path to BYU beating Kansas State? Yeah, I can. It's Avery Johnson's first true road game. BYU is going to be, Lavelle Edwards Stadium is going to be packed. BYU is going to want to make a statement. Kansas State's a very, very good team, but Provo's a tough place to play. Playing at elevation, home field advantage, all those things. We saw what happened all the way back in, when was it, 2019, when Keaton Slovis was a true freshman quarterback at USC, and he was throwing to guys who are all in the Pro Bowl now, Micah Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, there was all kinds of talent on that USC wide receiver core. Keaton Slovis looked terrible in that game. BYU confused him. The crowd rattled him, rather. It's tough, right? I mean, tough. Winning games on the road is hard, and that'll be the first one for a young quarterback. I think Kansas State, BYU could beat them. I think Kansas State's very good, and they could win the Big 12 too. They could come in and beat BYU by 3 scores. There's not any game where I feel like BYU is playing Georgia and there's just absolutely no chance. I think Utah's close to that game. I think Utah's going to be really tough. That is, in my mind, the toughest game, followed maybe closely by UCF. I think that's going to be a really tough game for BYU. But I think BYU can beat Utah, right? Utah was supposed to wipe the floor with Utah. Holy cow. Utah was supposed to beat BYU in 2021. They didn't, right? Utah was supposed to beat BYU by a lot in a lot of games, even during that 9-game losing streak, and BYU kept it close. I just don't think that BYU has any game that they simply cannot win. Now, the most likely 6 for a win, I mean, it's obvious, right? It's Wyoming, it's Southern Illinois, it's Houston, I think it's Baylor, I think it's Arizona State, and then that 6th one is up in the air. I don't think it's SMU. I think SMU is a very good team. I think BYU can beat SMU, but I think SMU is a very good team. In fact, according to ESPN's FBI, that's the least likely win for BYU this season is at SMU, something like a 19% win chance or whatever that metric is over there at FPI. I think BYU can win 6 games. I think there's 6 games. I think there's a path that BYU could win 8 or 9 games. I also think BYU could go 2-10. I'm excited for this season because of that. None of these teams feel insurmountable, but none of them are gimmies either. It should be really, really fun to follow. Which BYU alum has the best chance to make their NFL roster out of Keaton Slovis, Jaron Hall, Aiden Robbins, Max Tooley, Samson Nacua? It says etc. We could extend this to everybody, and it's like, Fred Warner and Puka Nacua. Those are the guys. Well, so let's just stick to the names that are listed here. I don't think Keaton Slovis makes that roster. That doesn't mean he won't make another roster, but I don't think it's going to happen in Indy. I think that Jaron Hall is on his way out. He did not play particularly well in the Vikings' first preseason game. Even with J.J. McCarthy going down to injury, Minnesota quickly went and signed Matt Corral. So I think Jaron Hall is on his way out. Aiden Robbins, that's always been an uphill battle. Maybe he's played well out in Cleveland, but I don't see that one happening. So it comes down to Max Tooley and Samson Nacua. I'm going to give the edge to Tooley because of what Tooley has done at BYU. Tooley proved that he can be a special teams player. I don't know if Max Tooley, if he was only a linebacker, I don't know if he's making that roster. He's played exceptionally well at Houston, but I don't know if he's played well enough to crack the 2 deep at linebacker. But he's proven he's versatile, and he's proven he's willing to play special teams, and he's played special teams really, really well. So I think that Max Tooley could make that 53-man. Samson Nacua could as well, but he's limited, right? He's a wide receiver. That's it. Max Tooley could play a couple of different spots, so I'm giving the edge to Tooley. Next question. Without a bowl game this year, who do you think would be on the hot seat from the coaching staff? Everyone. All of them. Every single coach. And I think that includes Jay Hill and the defensive coach as well. The defensive coaches have had a lot of leeway, and they should. They had a big job to come in, take over for Elisa Tuiaki, repair that roster, and start being competitive. I think they're well on their way to doing that and being very successful. However, the results on the field were not good last year. If they come in and they aren't good again this year, well, that would surprise me. But if they're not good again this year, then they're going to be on the hot seat. Aaron Roderick, I think, is on the hot seat today. Kalani Sitake, he's there as well. So everybody, without a bowl game, I think that everybody is potentially on the hot seat. I mean, all of them are. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation of where BYU is at. Next question. I've been hearing a lot about the tight ends, but no talk of Jackson Bowers. What's happening there? Before we get into Jackson Bowers, let's talk about some of the other tight ends who are in the room. Reiner Swanson, Keanu Hill, Ethan Erickson. Yeah, there's been a considerable amount of attention and hype and conversation about those guys, and deservedly so. They're very good players, but not a lot about Jackson Bowers. And so maybe to explain that, or at least offer up a theory, let's look at Bodie Schoonover. Bodie Schoonover was a big-time recruit as well for BYU. He was a big deal. And he came to BYU, and for 2 years, he really hasn't done much. And the rest of the defensive ends, aside from Tyler Batty, hadn't done much either. And I think as fans, it's really easy to say, well, what's wrong with Bodie Schoonover? He couldn't beat out those guys who were not producing. How could Bodie not beat those guys out? Is he a bust? Now, Bodie Schoonover is entering his third year in the program. He's still just a redshirt sophomore, and he's firmly the backup to Tyler Batty right now. He's going to play a lot this year, and he's well positioned to have 2 years where he's the guy coming off the edge once Tyler Batty goes to the NFL. The point to that is it takes time. I think we have a tendency to say that true freshmen are ready. And even if the guys aren't ahead of true freshmen, aren't producing, those true freshmen might not be ready. Those return missionaries might not be ready. Now, I thought that Jackson Bowers, because of his blocking ability and how physical he is, I thought he'd get on the field even potentially last year, and I thought we'd hear more buzz about him this year. But that doesn't mean he's a bust. That doesn't mean anything like that. It doesn't mean he's going to change positions or anything like that either. It means that, yeah, he had a little bit of room to grow, and Reiner Swanson's a freak. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of it. And Keanu Hill is a natural tight end. He's been there. He's experienced. He knows his stuff. Jackson Bowers, he got hurt. He dealt with some injuries last year, so that kind of hurt his true freshman campaign. He's still just a redshirt freshman. And so like Bodie Schoonover, like we have this tendency to want to say, well, if he's not playing now, is he ever going to play? Jackson Bowers could sit on the depth chart, sit on the scout teams, maybe buried on the 2 deep, and then come back and still have 3 years as BYU starting tight end. We like to put a lot of pressure on highly recruited freshmen, and maybe that's deserved. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not here to debate that. But what I'm saying is I don't think it's time to write Jackson Bowers off. I think because of that injury last year, he just had a little bit more development he needed to do. I think we're going to see him play this year, probably starts on special teams. But I think we're going to see Jackson Bowers. I still think he's going to be very, very good. That talent is undeniable. Moving on to the next question. Outside of LJ, Hinckley, and Miles, who are the running backs we need to keep an eye out for? Will they play? I feel like Miles is always off-season MVP with his workouts he posts, but his whole career, we hardly see him on the field. He's been hurt a lot. I mean, that's just the reality of his career. He's been hurt. Also, him posting his workouts, like I don't really care. A lot of people post their workouts. That's great. Like workouts are what they are. If we're allowing ourselves to be hyped up because of a workout video, that's on us, not the player. I mean, players are just sharing workouts. So Miles Davis, is he going to play? Yeah, he's going to play. I think we know who Miles is. I think he could take steps and with more opportunities and some help, he can be a little bit better than he's been. But I think we know who he is. Hinckley, Rapati, and LJ are going to be the guys running back. Who else? Pokai Hawanga is the real deal. He's very good. He's not Reno Mahe. Like we can't say he's Reno Mahe, but he's going to remind you of Reno Mahe, the way he plays. He could carry the ball out of the backfield. He could catch the ball as well. I've heard he started to figure things out. He's just young. He's a return missionary. So he's a freshman. He's young, but he started to put some things together this last week of camp that he looks good. I think he's going to find a role. I don't know what that role is. I don't know how big it is, but he's going to find a role. The other name that I keep hearing about that makes me excited because I loved him coming out of high school. I didn't know if he was going to be a college guy or not. Sione Moa, not the linebacker, not Ice Moa's brother, but another Sione Moa. And I think we have him listed. BYU's got him listed as Sione Moa 1 on the official roster. He played at Timpview, at BYU now. I think he's a walk-on. He was like really, really productive at Timpview. And I've heard things that, hey, he just kind of naturally figured it out. Reminds me a little bit of a guy like Lopini Katoa. He runs different, so I'm not comparing playing styles, but just that like Lopini got it done. Like he was never the flashiest, he was never the best, he was never the NFL guy, but Lopini just produced. And Sione Moa is kind of that same guy, just produced at high school, and it sounds like he's producing well. I think we might see him more than we expect. I don't think anybody's expecting to see him at all. But we might see him on the field for a handful of carries every game, especially early in the season, which would be great. I think he's very good. Like I say, just productive. I mean, who doesn't want more Lopini Katoas on this team that just produce, even if they aren't super flashy? All right, last question of the day. If Bohannon wins the quarterback job and Retzlaff doesn't play more than 20% of the season, doesn't Jake come back? So the 20% thing, let's start there. It's 4 games. They changed the rule to just 4 games now. So if you play it all in 4 games, that's your season. So there's that. Does Jake come back? Yeah, I don't think there's any reason that Jake wouldn't come back. I don't think that anybody is expecting Jake to leave. I think even if Jake plays and wins the starting job, he probably comes back for 1 more year. I think he has 1 more year if he wants it. But also he could transfer if he loses the job. I mean, I wouldn't stick around, right? I mean, if he loses this job, I would put money that he transfers, because yes, theoretically he could play behind Gary and then win the job again next year. But that would be really hard for me to say, hey, I was a starter. I was the guy. I competed as the starter. I was close. And now they're going to give me a 1 year. I don't know. I would leave if I was him, but absolutely he could come back. That's very, very possible. It's also possible that a guy like McKay Hillstead or Trace Bourget passes him up as QB2. I mean, there's lots of scenarios that could play out over the course of a 12-week season, but absolutely I don't think anybody's expecting him to just leave no matter what at the end of this year. I think it's more likely that he's at BYU again in 2025 than it is that he's not. So that's it. That's the mailbag for today. Appreciate you guys for sticking around. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, folks, we're almost there. It's almost football. Give them hell. Go Cougs.